Hello and welcome to the Milltown Way podcast, the independent Shamrock Rovers podcast covering all things hoops. I'm Ryan Brennan, and this week's episode I'm flying solo, but there's still plenty to get into. So, coming up in this episode, we'll look at Friday night's frustrating 1-0 defeat away to Dundalk. We see fresh international recognition for two Rovers players, but now could it impact upcoming league fixtures. We'll also look ahead to next Friday's return to Tallaght Stadium against Sligo Rovers, a night that will also carry real significance off the pitch. So wherever you're listening from, thanks for joining me. And let's get into it. We'll start off at Oriel Park. Dundalk beat Shamrock Rovers 1-0. Frustrating night overall, all in all. Rovers, a lack of chances, definitely not. It just came down to that final third, and Rovers not having it in them to get that one over the line. But like I said, there were chances there to be taken. They just weren't. On another night, I think Stephen Bradley said in his post match interview that on another night that could have easily been 3 points. It could have been 3 goals to go with it. But it wasn't to be. Kieran Kilduff's Dundalk side done well to kind of hold out. Obviously, they ultimately got down to 10 men not too long before the end of the game. So then they did have to ride that kind of momentum that Rovers had, but look, they did it. They did it all in all, and yeah, look, Rovers left disappointed. Oriel Park's not really a ground that Rovers get too much joy out of as a whole, in any ways. But yeah, another night that look they didn't get anything from it, leaving empty-handed and leaving with no goals. But for anyone who did see the game, whether they were at it or watching it on the telly, probably would be of a similar opinion that yeah, it could have easily went Rovers' way. It could have been 3-1. It could have been 4-1. But look, you can't take away from that spectacular goal that was the difference between the two sides either. Early doors, John McGovern gets a chance. And then first 15 minutes, I suppose it was a bit more even. I think Dundalk did have the slight edge over Rovers. Early on. No love lost for Dan Cleary, and anyways, every time he touched the ball, he was met with an array of bills from the home support, and it is to be expected. There was plenty of positives though. Look, nice passes of play between Enda Stevens, Lee Grace, and Jack Byrne. But I suppose that opening half an hour there wasn't really anything to write home about. More or less a non-event. A couple of minutes after, you have Ed McGinty who's forced to come out and save an attempt from Dundalk's A. Dervin. But again, like, or A. Dervin, whatever you pronounce that. But yeah, look, other than that, I don't think that first half was probably something to forget. Um, and look, that's just the way it was. It is. Look, Dundalk's new surface as well. You can't really forget about that either. It was advised by the club in their emails by Rovers emails, to ensure that no fans do any damage to their pitch. Obviously, what happened with the draw of the supporters at the start of the season, but they don't want to be handing out any bans, particularly coming up with, or particularly with the upcoming Dublin derbies, Bohs away, Pats at home. If they're to go ahead and in them arranged slots, because we'll get on to obviously them fixtures are in doubt now due to the recent international call ups. But yeah, other than that, like the first half, not too much to write home about. Owen Kenny beats a man. You get a clear attempt on Ed McGinty again. The shot itself turns out to be too soft and it's easy for him to come and collect. Victor does well again to keep the ball. And has an attempt that's just wide. And then Daryl Horgan, not too long before stoppage time of the first half, he beats his man and lines up a chance. But yeah, look, a couple of attempts, but not a clear cut chance then. The signs were that it was too easy for Dundalk to cut in, and ultimately then goes into the break goalless. I think that first half for Rovers, yeah, they mostly as a non-event. Um, if it's to go anyway, I think it was Dundalk who had just a slight edge over Rovers in the first half. But again, when I say that, it's not to say Dundalk or pepper and Rovers goal, because it was far from it. And yeah, ultimately, like, I think Rovers not so much sleepwalking in that first half to that leads to a 1-0 defeat to Dundalk, but just more so yeah, I don't know. I just think they didn't lay enough on them. Half time they go into the break. Rovers is 64% of the possession. Registered 4 shots. Only one of them being on target. You know, the stats kind of tell a story in itself. Dundalk 36% possession, 6 shots, but the same amount on target with the one. And yeah, like that, I don't think either side looked threatening, and yeah, I think time would tell that they were just growing into the game, taking a little bit longer than usual. I'd say probably on either side of the fixture, and yeah, Rovers ultimately they start the second half fast. They come out the blocks. There was a couple of changes at the interval as well, which I think was interesting from Stephen Bradley to see where his head was at. After watching that first half, both Michael Noonan and John McGovern made way for Aaron Green and Graham Burke. Stephen Bradley said in his post match comment as well that there were spaces there for Rovers that the two strikers that weren't getting into them maybe, and yeah, probably just thought, look, more experience on Aaron Green, Graham Burke, and that they'd work that Dundalk defence that bit more, and ultimately they do straight away from kick off of the second half. Graham Burke, Victor Ozenviona have a nice piece of interplay, and ultimately it leads to a chance very quickly. I think it's like literally the first minute of the second period, and yeah, it didn't pay off. But then Jack Byrne not too long after sets up Victor again, the temp blocked, and then yeah, there was that first, I think, 10-15 minutes of the second half. Rovers just dictating the play, applying plenty of pressure, where you think it's just going to be a matter of when Rovers put the ball in the back of the net, and not if. Then yeah, more positive play from Rovers, control from Victor Ozenviona. He slipped in Aaron Green, who has a shot narrowly wide. Particularly at that moment, I thought this is just more when a Rovers going to score here, and the pressure mounted. Look, it wasn't to be in that moment, and but look, the subs made a good impact on linking up well with others. Like I said, Jack Byrne, Victor Ozenviona, and they're feeding the two strikers as well. And Graham Burke and Aaron Green just wasn't. Look, it didn't come up trumps. Um, and then you had Aaron Green again. He was in again. Leads to a corner, and then Dan Cleary comes very close with a headed effort from that corner. And you're just at this point, as the game's starting to wear on, at this point you're still thinking Rovers are gonna break down Dundalk. You're just thinking, when is it gonna happen? Um, McGinty's made to work from distance. That was coming up to the 70th minute, and I think at that point, particularly after sustained pressure from Rovers, you just saw it's a reminder that this game is still goalless, and there's still an opposition in front of Rovers that are going to try and nick 3 points. Obviously, look, ultimately then, about 9 minutes later, they do just that. Tyreek Wilson hangs at the back post, picks up a bit of space, loses his marker, and yeah, look, you can't knock it. It is a rocket that goes into the back of the net, and yeah, Rovers are made to pay for their lack of kind of ruefulness. Daryl Horgan knocks in a great ball, and yeah, as I said, Tyreek Wilson just he leaves McGinty with a little chance of stopping it. And look, it's credit to Tyreek and credit to Daryl as well, the two lads linking up for that goal. But ultimately, it's just punishing Rovers in the sense that Rovers had the chances and they'd go on for the remaining 13 minutes, and what was added ended up being about 7 minutes played. That look, Rovers had the chances, all well and good, Creighton, but you need someone who's in there. Um, yeah, you just need someone who's in there who has that ruefulness. And look, Rovers have it within, but it's just sometimes it's not there. And look, that's football. 10 minutes to go, then Jack Byrne and Dan Cleary make way for Dylan Watson, Conor Malley, and you can see ultimately it adjusts the shape of Rovers going in. Obviously, falling behind, Bradley sees it needs to be a change, and he does just that. But yeah, then coming up the approach of stoppage time, Dundalk are met with a second yellow card, and they go down to 10 men. Yeah, Tyreek Wilson, the goal scorer, ends up getting sent off, and yeah, look, you think at this point Rovers are definitely bound to get at least a draw, if not a win, if it went well. From that foul, Rovers get a free kick right on the edge of the box. You're looking at it thinking that this is going to work the keeper at least. Essentially, it does. Dylan Watts tries to wrong foot the keeper and forces a save out of him and leads to a corner. And then Jake Mulroney from the heads across a greener, but it's great. It forces another great save, and that's probably another note of the game is that Enda Minogue is forced into some great saves, and ultimately he keeps Dundalk getting them 3 points, keeps a clean sheet, and man of the match performance from him. Really, I think it was Warden Fotma, but anyways, he was the man of the match. I think I'm sure that's what I'm sure he got it as well from Virgin, but look, it's sore for Rovers. Another couple more chances for Rovers in stoppage time. Sobowale, a good cross for Graham Burke, goes wide, and then ultimately that very last chance, a Dylan Watts header hits the post, comes back out. Graham Burke has an attempt, but it's met by the keeper, and that was about 5 minutes into added time. And once the keeper saves that, I think Dundalk probably go into a bit more celebratory mode, knowing that that was job done, and that the ref wasn't going to allow much more time for Rovers to get that equaliser. Particularly, I think it went into 7 minutes. I think six were added, but obviously time wasting from Dundalk as expected with a lead, and particularly as expected with going down to 10 men. But ultimately, look, I think on another day, as Rovers probably win that comfortably and collect 3 points and you move on and get an away win under the belt. It wasn't to be. Um, but it's a tough one. I think for Stephen Bradley to take. I said Tyreek Wilson got the red. I meant John Wilson as well, just to correct myself there on that one. But look, I think it's one that you lick your wounds from. I don't think Stephen Bradley be too disgruntled by the performance of what he saw. I know there's probably mixed opinions as well, and there's bound to be when when Rovers finished the game being beaten, and I know Dundalk go down to 10 men. I know it's late on, so it's a little bit different. But for Rovers finished the game 22 shots. I know just 4 on target. Compare that to Dundalk's 9. Rovers completed the game with 69% possession as well. Look, I think it's a positive performance for sure. It was also, look, Rovers weren't punished too much in the sense of other results. Obviously, Pats were beaten by Shelbourne and Richmond Park, which helps as well maintain that 3 point lead. The other side of that coin is probably that Rovers did have an opportunity to extend the lead to 6 points at the top of the table, which they missed out on now. I'm sure Stephen Bradley will be looking at that as well and thinking that's an opportunity missed. But look, it's football at the end of the day, and Rovers missed out on that, but there'll be plenty more opportunities. And look, the two face each other, obviously Rovers and Pats, or scheduled to face each other on the 29th of May. They have 2 more games to play before that. Obviously, Sligo Rovers at home and Bohs away. But I think Rovers can gain a lot of confidence from that performance. The only issue, and I think it was my more so takeaway of the game, was that Rovers are, there's plenty of opportunities for Rovers on the night against Dundalk. They lack the end product in the final third. Does it potentially show the need for an out and out striker who's not someone maybe of Michael Noonan's age of 17? But again, not on the other side of the coin, that they're Aaron Green's age and they're 35. You need that balance. Arguably, I know Graham Burke is probably that balance, but he's not an out and out striker. As you see on the pitch, he's more of a free roamer that can easily drop back and help out the defence and carry possession forward and get a lot of important yards for Rovers. Or he's one that obviously that can score. He can score goals, but he's not meant to be a player who sits up front and wait for chances to come. He nearly earns them himself, or he creates them himself as well, with that kind of wand of a left foot. There is just, I think, for me personally, it's led to questions again. Look, we discussed this on this podcast previously about Rovers' need for that out and out striker. Michael Noonan, he comes into good form and he shows he has that ruthlessness 100%, but sometimes if it's not there and you're relying, then the other option is you're relying on Aaron Green, who's on that other end of the age scale, a sense of a footballer. I can't help but think that there does need to be that fine balance. And even, look, I mention him every week, but Rory Gaffney obviously out as well. But again, he's close to Aaron Green, the same age as Aaron Green, and they're both 35. So yeah, I don't know. I think in the summer window, particularly again with, as I say, with European football coming, and then the cup football that will come as well. Sorry, about 36 years, right? It's not 35, but yeah, it's just one of these moments that you think, you know, do Rovers need that? And as well, when you look across, obviously last week we mentioned France Piero being making a positive impact for Galway. The other side of that coin you have for Dundalk was Arubi. I'm not too sure how to pronounce his first name, but Bemi Arubi maybe. For Dundalk, he's 21. He was really good. Made a good impact on that Rovers defence. He did come off with just 10 minutes to go, but I thought he was a real force to be reckoned with, and someone that you could see probably potentially um, punishing Rovers. He didn't on the night, but yeah, he did. He did make that defence work quite a bit. But on that note, we'll move it across to obviously the games that, as I said, I've been more so hinting at is of course the upcoming fixtures with Bohs and Pats, who has now been kind of, I suppose, been thrown into a bit of threat, and it is of course because some League of Ireland players have made it for the upcoming international camp for Ireland, something that we've advocated for, and that is for Rovers Ed McGinty and Adam Brennan. They've been named in it for the upcoming friendlies to take place against Qatar on May 28th and Canada on June 6th. Well, first of all, it's a huge achievement for the two lads, and I think thoroughly earned. On the Ed McGinty front, I just hope he gets minutes. I can see this very easily being, nearly tokenism that he kind of just gets thrown in just for the sake of having a League of Ireland player in there. I know they're not the only two, um, but yeah, it's just that's the only concern. Adam Brennan, it makes sense. He's in there with the 21s, so to bring him in another step on is an honourable achievement for the lad. But yeah, I really hope we see these actually getting minutes. The games are over a week apart as well, weirdly enough. But look, if they get minutes, I don't think anyone can have too many complaints. Now, of course, the issue we have here, or well, the questions that it leads to is, will the games go ahead against Bohs first of all on Monday, May 25th, and will it go ahead against Pats on Friday, May 29th? The Qatar friendly is Thursday, May 28th, so it does lead to questions there of will the Rovers games go ahead? They can request to get the games postponed. I think they'll end up doing that, and it makes sense. Look, I think having if you're going to be forced to play without Ed McGinty for them two games, that would be a quite a big ask. And then you either have Alex Noonan or you have Lee Stacey, um, going in there and filling, their big boots to fill. So, and they're two crucial games as well, coming with two Dublin derbies. It's a big ask to put a keeper in there, particularly. Obviously, Ed McGinty's played every minute of this season so far, and that's what's earned them the call up. But yeah, I don't think Rovers can. I don't think they should either. Try play these two games, and particularly their friendlies as well. But as in on the Ireland front, I don't think Rovers should be playing these two games. Um, yeah, on that front without two key players, Ed McGinty, he showed his importance again against Dundalk. Obviously, look, lost in the end, but he couldn't stop that from rifling into the net from Tyreek Wilson. And as I said, the other two League of Ireland players in there, Connor Brown from Cork City and Dawson Devoy from Bohs. That does also lead to the likelihood of the Bohs and Rovers game on the Monday being postponed, because both sides will be without key players for that Dublin derby, and it's the last one in the day in the form of Daily Mount. Yeah, look, I think first of all, it's huge that these lads have been called in. The pessimist in me is saying it's a form of tokenism, but I think it's two friendlies. I would hope it's not, and as much as it's in the Aviva, and I don't know, I think they kind of the friendlies get built up a bit more when they're in the Aviva, and then they're going to Canada as well. Like on paper, but they're still a friendly at the end of the day. They're not a big game on the Ireland front, and it's not preparing for any competition coming up this summer for Ireland. So I do think, I do think they should be getting minutes for sure. Look, I've spoken on this podcast before about, I think nearly everyone who's in the camp should be getting minutes across these games. In their friendlies, they should. I think you can make as many. I think you make 11 subs most of the time, and that's what they should be doing here. I know there is certain times where there's rules where they can't make as many, which is, look, if you can't make as many, you can't make as many. But no, I think in this case, if they can, they should. And I think you saw, look, on Saturday, Ireland played Grenada in that friendly and won 5-0. Um, and even then, the keepers didn't change until I think it was around the 70th minute or so. And look, if it was to happen again, once you see Ed McGinty putting on an Ireland jersey, and if he was to be able to play in the Aviva, that'd be huge for him. And the only concern I have is, I think probably goalkeeper in the Ireland sense is probably one of the strongest positions, and you have Caoimhín Kelleher there. Here, look, obviously he's doing very well for Brentford. You have Mark Travers there too, so look, they're strong players in that position. So for Ed McGinty and even for Conor Brann in that sense, breaking into that position, particularly when obviously look at goalkeepers, you can only be one on the pitch. It's not as if you're a defender and you can play across the board or midfield or anywhere like that. So yeah, they'll it's a positive sign. And look, once they get minutes, I think that's the main thing. But yeah, it's just also, what will it lead to? And yeah, for look on the more important thing on the Rovers front, whilst it's huge for both Ed McGinty and Adam Brennan, what will it mean for the upcoming Dublin derbies? I think we saw before when Johnny Kenny last year, or sorry, not last year, the year before, I think the Rovers played Galway away, and we had nearly we did have accommodation booked, and then not too long before it got postponed due to Johnny Kenny being involved in the international setup. Probably a similar scenario here. I can't see Rovers trying to play two Dublin derbies, Bohs away and Pats at home without Ed McGinty. Adam Brennan, like, I think, again, he's an outfielder, and in his position, I think there's options there to replace him. So it's not as severe, but I think on the Rovers front, and like if you're to put Alex Noonan, for example, in there to hand him his first game of the season at Bohs away in Dalymount, and the last game in Dalymount, between the two, it's not a good sign, or it's not a it's not probably the best place to throw him in, and yeah, I'm sure Stephen Bradley's probably thinking something along the same line. Alan Reynolds had advocated for Dawson Devoy to be called in as well, obviously the way Bradley did for Victor Osimhen, but yeah, or Alan Reynolds did for Dawson Devoy. He gets called in, so he won't stand in his way. But ultimately, I think now, looking at it, look, it's great. I'm sure he's delighted that Dawson Devoy's in it, but I'm sure he's also thinking Bohs can't be going and playing Rovers in Dalymount without him. He is key. He's obviously a key player, and that's why he's in this team. Bohs then go to Sligo away as well, which he'd potentially miss, or well, he would miss it. So yeah, we could see these two games for Rovers being postponed, and yeah, probably two games for Bohs postponed as well. But yeah, look, overall, it's great to see the two lads, the two lads on the Rovers front. It's great to see them in the Ireland setup. It's something we advocate for all the time. Yes, look, once it's not a form of tokenism, if they came back from the two games and got 0 minutes, look, I'm sure there'd be mass frustration. From the even the League of Ireland perspective, really, to see, as much as even rival supporters probably, obviously, look, they're not going to care maybe too much that Ed McGinty and Adam Brennan are missing two Dublin derbies, but they'll want to see League of Ireland players in that setup, in the Ireland setup, and that's what is the main call for. And what Heimer Hallgrimsson, look, he called in Josh before when he was at Rovers before he's moved to Lincoln. I know he's been injured for quite a bit, but yeah, Heimer obviously called in Josh Honahan at the time and didn't give many minutes still to yet. to make an appearance for Ireland, but to call him in and not give him any minute, like it's simple things like this that um yeah, it just leads to frustration, and it leads then like to what it ultimately will lead to is just the genuinity of these call ups. It's all well and good and putting names on a piece of paper and saying, yeah, League of Ireland players are in there for them, are in for these friendlies against Qatar and Canada, but we cannot put names on the paper. You need to put them on the pitch to show you're taking this seriously, and you're not just kind of essentially shushing people, or you could come back to them with your argument saying that you did call them into the team. That's no good. You may as well just leave them out, and the League of Ireland season can continue itself. If they don't get minutes, it will be hugely frustrating. But look, at the end of the day, they're in the team. You have to think with optimism that they will get minutes. I'm sure they will. I'm hopeful they will. And yeah, look, it's a good sign. At least we're getting somewhere. Kind of, is the opinion I'm forming of it since I've seen the names in the team. But yeah, I also hope that there will be a request that Rovers are going to have their games moved. I'm sure that's probably being weighed up at the moment. If not, it's already been decided maybe that they will or won't. Because yeah, it's a big ask. Look, for Alex Neil or even Lee Stacey to hop in nets to play Bohs and Pats. It's yeah, look, it's not something that Stephen Bradley will want either. Look, he's a player. He's a manager that manages these players very well, even just man management itself and of the individual. And yeah, he won't want to do that. But yeah, I also look. I'd love to know what the supporters think as well. Do you play on or do you postpone? Do let us know in the comments as well, or in the comments of the podcast, or on social media, or get in touch with us as well. To see what you think. Should Rovers be playing Bohs and Pats even if McGinty and Adam Brennan aren't there, and just play on? Or, as I said, do you request postponements with the league? They've done it. They've accommodated it before. Will they do it again? Obviously, it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, that's for another. I'm sure we'll find out quite soon as well. Obviously, the game between Rovers and Bohs is only, well, when you're listening to this, it'll be directly a week away. So decisions have to be made soon. Calls have to be made, and yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how it all unfolds. But look, we'll move it on to the game that we do know is taking place, and that is, of course, Shamrock Rovers hosting Sligo Rovers next Friday in Tallaght Stadium. Another big game. Look, Rovers are back in Tallaght for the first time since the 1-0 win over Waterford, where it was quite I suppose, an unconvincing win. But yeah, it's another big game, particularly on the back of losing to Dundalk. Rovers at home, the record continues to be nearly perfect. 7 wins and a draw out of 8 games, 0 defeats. That one draw was Dundalk as well, and 1-1 when Dundalk equalised late on to prevent Rovers from taking 3 points there. But other than that, like, it's an immaculate home form record, really. When you look at it, 22 points as well from a possible 24. Open play goals versus set pieces, normally not my forte, but yeah, it's something that you see kind of creep in at Tallaght Stadium as well, which will be interesting to see how they go about tackling that next Friday against Sligo Rovers. But yeah, obviously Sligo, they sit currently ninth in the table. They are 9 points above Waterford, obviously yet to win a game. Nearly looked like they might have nearly been doing it against Derry City on Friday gone, and the 2-2 draw, but it wasn't to be for them. But Sligo, on the back of, well, quite a humbling defeat to Galway in a derby. They lost 4-1 to Galway United on Saturday night. They ended up equalising through Alex Nolan, but ultimately it wasn't to be for them. And yeah, 4-1 defeat. It was their 9th defeat of the season as well. It's going to be a tough game no matter what. I don't think this, Sligo Rovers, they're not. They know how to frustrate Rovers in the end. And the last time Sligo Rovers were in Tallaght Stadium was when Rovers played them on the final day of last season. Sligo ended up winning 2-1, a game that meant very little to Rovers. It was just more of a there's a party on afterwards, as Shamrock Rovers lifted their 22nd league title. But yeah, that was more of an interesting game. We also got to see Lee Stacey in goal for that game as well. Aside from the football that's taking place, just before I get on to that more so, there is a memorial event that will take place before the game. The club will honour deceased supporters, former players, committee members, and directors. Their names will appear in the match programme as well. There will also be a special ceremony at the Forever in Time brick in the wall from 7 p.m. to 7:15 p.m. Obviously, note that the game does start at 8 p.m. There will be wreath laying, applause, family members of former players attend as well. And yeah, it's just that's look, these type of events. It's one of those nice. It reminds you of what the club is all about. Um, so yeah, make sure you do get involved in that. I'm sure plenty of supporters will do as well. There's the club are promoting on their on social media platforms as well as their communications via email. So do keep your eye on that as well. Or even if you do want to get involved yourself, do check your emails because surely it's there. If you're either a ticket holder, season ticket holder, or if you're a club member, you'll see plenty of notice around all of that. But I suppose for the football, look, Rovers need to get back on track. They want to bounce back from the 1-0 defeat to Dundalk. As I said, it could, on another night they go and they win that game 4-1. So there's plenty of positives. It's not a typical comeback off the back of a defeat. It's a coming off the defeat that Rovers could have easily won. Maybe they should have won. But what a lack of that killer instinct, I suppose. You can't say there was a lack of attempts or chances because that was in plentiful supply. It was just more so look, Rovers couldn't break down Dundalk in the end and couldn't get past Minogue, who, as I put on a man of the match display. But yeah, look, Rovers are back in Tallaght. Selection questions will arise. Do you kind of stick with what you got, or do you freshen up? The other thing that you want to keep in mind as well is I'm sure we will know the outcome of whether Rovers are going to play Bohs on the Monday, but they'll need to know, of course, going into that game against Sligo, and it'll even probably affect how they prepare throughout the week. You know, if Friday Monday is very different to a Friday to Friday, and even sure, look, if the games were to be moved, Rovers wouldn't be playing for about 2 or 3 weeks then after the Sligo Rovers game. Because if they move their game against Bohs and Pats, they'll go from the 22nd of May to the 12th of June without a game. Which look, it leads to an interesting question, but of kind of fresh match fitness, freshness, fatigue, or the managing the minutes. But yeah, there's obviously the break will come, and that's already scheduled in anyways at the more or less the start of June. So if Rovers can, yeah, they'll need clarity, and yeah, look, we constantly kind of go on about these double game weeks, and at the moment it's scheduled that there will be one, and that's Bohs away after, but it's. I think these double game weeks, no one really tends to like them. Stephen Bradley calls them out quite a bit in his comments that affects match fitness, preparation. I think the one I always think of in terms of the double game week is, of course, the one at Paddy's Day where essentially 5 games took place. There was 3-0 draws. Are you kind of, whilst you're putting the Friday Monday in there, are you essentially taking a bit of the quality away, a bit of the spark? Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. I understand when teams play Friday Monday if a game's been postponed to the rearranged one. And obviously, look, you're trying to fit it in with their calendar and stuff. Like for example, Waterford play Drogheda tomorrow, but that game was a postponed game, so that's why they're putting it in now. And yeah, Stephen Bradley's been known to kind of say that the season should be more or less extended, and as a result of cutting out the Friday Monday. I know as well as that. Look, it's not a normal Friday Monday. When Rovers play Bohs, it's the games being moved forward from the European fixtures. Like essentially, you're getting, Rovers are going to be involved in Europe, it's guaranteed, and so will Derry City. So in that sense, Rovers are to play Bohs, Derry to play Shell. So that's why the games are are being brought forward. Essentially, they're being postponed from the week that they should have been taking place. But again, I don't know. Particularly when it's Bohs, I just don't know how you look at that and think that should be on a Monday, on the back of a normal game week. You're playing Friday, Monday. I don't know. It doesn't sit particularly right. But then I suppose the other option is putting on it maybe a Saturday or a Sunday after European football during the week. Um, or look, Stephen Bradley's solution is, of course, extending the season on and making it that bit longer. But as Rovers approach playing Galway, look overall Galway in their game in their 4-1 defeat to Sligo, in their 4-1 defeat to Galway. They finished 67% possession, 17 shots, but it's stats tell one story and the scoreline tells the other. There's I don't think you can look at this fixture and think Rovers shouldn't be demanding anything less than 3 points against Sligo, but look, they're a difficult opposition. Rovers done well at the showgrounds earlier in the year as well. They done well there, and a 2-0 win. Remember Danny Grant's stunner as well in stoppage time of the first half. That was phenomenal as well. And Ed McGinty, he kept a clean sheet at his former club's ground, which was even sweeter. Pico Lopez got red card in that game as well, and he won't be playing. He hasn't. He has already played his last game for Rovers ahead of the World Cup. He got a send off as well. And if you haven't seen on social media, check that out. But yeah, he got his kind of hero send off. I think he was being driven to the airport to meet up with the Cape Verde side. They have a friendly coming up soon against Serbia, in preparation for the World Cup. So yeah, that's already the end of Pico for the as we already knew anyways. But definitely now that he's on the way to linking up with his teammates. And yeah, obviously everyone wishes him the best, and we'll be cheering him on from Ireland to see how he gets on over at the US, playing in the World Cup. Obviously, there won't be any Irish team over there, but the closest thing come to it is having Shamrock Rovers captain Pico Lopez there, and he'll have plenty of backing from the Shamrock Rovers support as he embarks on that. And it'll be, it's a huge honour for him, and it's a huge honour for the league as well that he is going to be playing in the World Cup, and he plays for Shamrock Rovers. So yeah, nothing but the best for him. But Rovers still have a job to do, and they're going to have to do it without him. We're seeing now how Rovers are lining out without him, and that's a back three of Enda Stevens, Lee Grace, and Daniel Cleary. We expect probably more of the same when Sligo Rovers come to Tallaght next week. And yeah, look, definitely nice pieces of interplay that sees them link up with the midfield options, and Jack Byrne and your Victor Osinviunas, your Matt Healy's, even Conor Malley when he came on for the last kind of few minutes or so of the 1-0 defeat to Dundalk. So yeah, look, I don't think anyone really looks out of place there. Still missing Corey O'Sullivan through injury. So yeah, I think Rovers would be, as much as Pico is such an influential character as well in the Rovers team and performance wise as well. But I think at the moment it's looking like Rovers have plenty of full strong options there that we'll make that replacement kind of seamless as can be. And yeah, look, they'll look to continue on. A 1-0 defeat to Dundalk isn't without, when you're taking out your captain. Look, the ship seems to be quite steady, all right. And yeah, look, Pico will be missed, but Rovers need to keep going, and he'll be supporting from afar as well. No doubt about that. But yeah, look, it's going to be another tough fixture for Rovers in Tallaght against Sligo. But yeah, you look at the game and think you can't really expect nothing but 3 points. Nothing football's guaranteed, but look, I think Rovers should be aiming for 3 points over Sligo Rovers. They come winless in 4 as well. 2 defeats and 2 draws in that time. But the 2 draws have come against Pats and Shelbourne, where the 2 defeats have been to Drogheda and Galway. So that tells a story in itself as well. They've been positive, and even before that, it was a 4-game unbeaten run, and that included wins over Bohs, Waterford, and Dundalk, and a draw in there with Derry as well. So yeah, they're a mixed bag, and they are only 3 points off safety. Yeah, I think Rovers can aim for 3 points there, and should be aiming for 3 points. But yeah, aside from that, that's been episode 31 of the Milltown Way. If you haven't already, do check out our exclusive interview with Robert Goggins as well. It's available on our YouTube channels, and you'll have seen it promoted across our social media platforms as well. But again, as I said, do make sure you give that a watch. It's very interesting. And Robert Goggins, as we all know, has plentiful knowledge of the club inside and out. There probably isn't the fact that he doesn't know about Shamrock Rovers. But other than that, follow us across the socials, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll speak to you after Sligo Rovers. Thanks for listening.